So I have been hearing a lot of Christians giving their 2 cents about what's going on in California with the fires, and I just want to respond to some of them because some of them are upsetting and frustrating and worrisome. I hear a lot of Christians saying, well, this is what the people of California deserve. Because California is not known to be the most Christian conservative state. So naturally, since these people are living in a way contrary to the way designed by this all-loving being of Christianity, all of their stuff has to burn. All their property, pets, sometimes the people themselves need to just burn and be destroyed, because I guess that's what happens when you don't listen to an all-loving being or don't want to follow him. It's just the lack of empathy from the people who make these comments. It's like, well, that's just what they deserve. That's just what people deserve for turning away from God. It says a lot more about those people making the comments. It says a lot more about their religion, and it says a lot more about their God than it does about the people in California who are suffering and struggling. It's also worth mentioning Florida, which lately has been kind of pushing more towards Christian conservative, even in its laws, just got battered by a bunch of hurricanes. So you have a state that's leaning more towards Christianity and a state that's leaning more away from Christianity, both being battered in some way, shape, or form. Is God battering them both? Does God make that make sense? If you try to be Christian, these terrible natural events happen. If you don't, these terrible natural events happen. It's almost like it has nothing to do with Christianity or the Christian God, and these are natural processes that have other explanations. I've also recently been seeing posts about statues, religious statues that have survived the fires. You know, stone statues that have miraculously survived fire. And this one really brings back some residual frustration, because I already get frustrated when people find like Bibles that have survived house fires. Even like a story, this woman was asleep in her bed and she died in the fire, but the Bible on her nightstand was perfectly fine, and the family's like, it's a sign from God, it's from God. Your loved one is dead. Your loved one died right next to it in the fire, but I guess we don't care about that. And it's especially frustrating because Bibles are thick books. They're thick, so sometimes it's a little bit harder to burn through them. A lot of them are also leather bound. Some of them also have flame retardant stuff painted on the outside of the pages. Some of them are in special cases to help protect them against stuff. And so when they survive these fires, it's like, yeah, they had a little bit of an advantage, especially when a lot of the Bibles that survived these fires didn't. They're just like burned and destroyed all on the outside. You can kind of read some of the middle of the pages, but oh my gosh, it's miraculous. God saved them from a fire. That's frustrating enough, because it's stuff that you would expect. That's normal. That's attributed to God. But it's another thing when we're talking stone statues. There was one, it was a stone statue, I think it was of Mary or something, in the middle of a rock garden. And it's like, it didn't get burned, because stone kind of doesn't. It's also like the Notre Dame Cathedral when it had a fire and the Golden Cross survived. It's like, yeah, and you have people on the internet like breaking down. It's like, here's like what it takes for wood to burn. Here's what it takes for a cross to melt, and it's or a golden cross to melt. And the fire just didn't get hot enough to melt the Golden Cross. But it's a miracle because it's a cross that didn't burn. It's a miracle. There's no other explanation. It's a miracle. Also, it's crazy to me how we have a big golden cross in our church rather than, I don't know, like feeding the poor. Like, why do you, like, I don't know. I think Christianity is supposed to be more of a charitable organization. Why do you have a giant golden cross? It's stuff like that where it's like, I'd forgive it if it was 10,000 years ago. And I do forgive the people 10,000 years ago who saw the seasons changing, who saw a solar eclipse and thought it was something supernatural because they didn't have a better explanation. We have better explanations now. We know how stone reacts to fire. We know how gold reacts to fire versus how wood reacts to fire. Like, we understand this stuff, but there are still people who sometimes willfully are ignorant of these things. And instead, when these Bibles survive, or when these stone statues survive, or when the Golden Cross survive, they say it's miraculous from God. It can't have any other explanation. Present to me, like walk into one of those completely incinerated, shard houses and bring out to me a strictly wooden cross that survived, and I might honestly be impressed. Because no, stone statues outside of your house surviving fire has nothing to do with anything supernatural or spiritual. Also, if people had stone statues outside of their house, they were probably religious in some sense. So if you have religious Christian people living amongst, the godless heathen, still being brave enough in this godless state to put religious statues and stuff outside their house, they still lost everything. Like, their homes are still gone, so God still just gave them the finger. It just doesn't make sense to me unless you already have a bias towards God, towards the supernatural, and you're just filtering and twisting everything that's going on, everything that you see, to fit and reinforce that bias, even when it just simply doesn't. The situation in California is awful. It just is. But it's also something that's just kind of naturally happening. Maybe unnaturally, considering our hand in climate change, but not supernatural. Nothing divine, nothing spiritual. At least it really just, we have no need for that hypothesis in explaining any of the stuff that I mentioned in this video. Have some empathy, have some compassion. Don't sit here and cheer when people have lost their homes, their possessions, their pets, lives, and loved ones, because that's what they deserve for upsetting your all-loving God that we have no reason to believe exists to begin with. And do some research. Educate yourself.